That spark of innovation, it's just waiting for the perfect combination of tools and talent to bring it to life. Welcome to Pitch, Build, Scale. I'm your host, Chris Fanchi, a recovering startup founder, veteran SaaS marketer, turned dev tech enthusiast and growth specialist. Each episode, we connect with the builders, the visionaries, and the problem solvers who are redefining what's possible with today's technology and pioneering the websites, apps, and software products of tomorrow. These are the conversations that transform how we build, how we sell, and how we scale technology businesses in a world where the tech evolves by the minute. Ready to stay ahead of the curve? This is Pitch, Build, Scale. Hello and welcome to today's episode. We've got a very exciting guest. For those of you just joining the podcast, we are Big North Marketing and specialize in helping dev shops and SaaS companies scale their revenue. So if you want to learn how to take your SaaS or dev business to the next level, make sure to stick around. And if you're interested in a free growth consultation, just drop us the word growth in the DMs. Today's guest is Doug Petkanics, founder of Livepeer, the world's open video infrastructure. His latest innovation, Daydream, a real-time AI transformer for live video. Powered by Livepeer's decentralized compute network, Daydream makes advanced visual effects accessible for creators and streamers using nothing more than text prompt. This is where decentralization meets creativity. So let's get into it. Doug, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Really excited to be here.
Great. So I like to start with learning a little bit about your backstory. So what first got you into technology and what keeps you building after multiple successful startups?
Sure thing. Like, many people who were growing up in the 90s, just as the internet was sort of being born, it was sort of this accessibility to this new open connected system of information known as the World Wide Web. And of course, like anyone who was, a teenager during that time, it was games and interacting with fans on forums and websites and whatnot. So I always got interested in programming, first from sort of playing games, learning if you could make a game, eventually building websites and communities for people that were playing games. And then that led me on a path of studying computer science and software engineering and ultimately entrepreneurship.
Very exciting. So what was your background? What did you study in school? And then when did you first get into the entrepreneurial world?
I think, like I said, I'd always been sort of a little entrepreneurial at heart, building websites and whatnot as a teenager. My high school had a great computer science program, so I was very fortunate to have exposure to that earlier than many others. And I continued, with that in university, and that was my major, computer science engineering. Started my career at a big software engineering group at Accenture, the big consulting firm, and really learned how to build big systems at scale for enterprise clients. But it only took about a year and a half before the entrepreneurial itch set in, and had the opportunity to join a startup right before they went through Y Combinator, and I got to sort of be part of that and get that whole I call that like an accelerated MBA for entrepreneurs is the couple of months in Y Combinator and the years that follow trying to launch and build your business with all the great, advisorship and mentorship and learning that comes with that. So that set me off and running. And then it wasn't long before I was ready to found my own startup as well.
So what was the first startup that you founded yourself?
Yeah, so I've actually had the privilege of working with my same co-founder, Eric Tang, across 3 startups now. On the first one, we had another co-founder, Jordan Cooper, and we built a startup called Hyperpublic, which was a local data platform for developers, just as GPS devices were getting put into cell phones and everyone was starting to build apps that needed location. So, we had a lot of users who were big publishers like mapping platforms and sort of social local applications. And one of our users, Groupon, ended up acquiring us to be their basically data engineering team. And, why do they need local data? They had 10,000 salespeople selling to millions of businesses around the world in 50 plus different countries. And they needed really effective local data about businesses, points of interest, what was on the menu, what price points were, how customers were reviewing things. And we built a whole technology platform to aggregate and clean and make that information available. And we had a successful startup journey early on with that.
That's great. Where did you go from there then?
Yeah, the next startup, we're working with the same co-founders, didn't work out and completely failed. So we had that experience as well. What was interesting about that, we were building a mobile publishing platform as the internet was shifting from the desktop web to the mobile web. And we said, hey, every e-commerce platform, every publisher is going to need tools to just convert all of their content and their assets to work really nicely on mobile and be consumed inside of, not web pages, because no one's browsing web pages on mobile, but inside of the apps where people are consuming content. Twitter, Pinterest, Google, Facebook. We started building on those four platforms APIs to structure data into what we called cards inside of their platforms. They all had these open development or they all had these development platforms for that. And then something weird happened, which was after a year or two, they all started closing off their APIs, changing the rules of how developers could interact, and working directly with our customers, sort of cutting us out. And we're like, man, everything we thought was going to happen in the world happened, and we didn't get to be part of it because we relied on these big tech platforms for their developer permissions and the distribution. We're like, never again are we making that mistake. And that led us to, can I at least, to this sort of brand new open development platform called the blockchain, and this development platform called Ethereum in particular, which was completely open access, permissionless. You can build and deploy what you want. No one was in control and could change the rules on you. And that was really, really compelling to developers who loved open source. And it had this one additional superpower, which we found really cool, was that it actually let you program with money and with incentives so that not only could you build open software, but you could actually embed economic incentives into them to get people to contribute to it, to run it, where they'll benefit from the increasing usage of it. And it's a longer story, but we thought that was really cool and we're hooked.
So that takes us into Livepeer, right? So talk a little bit about the company now and how you've progressed over the time that you've been working on it.
Yeah, so I think you mentioned during the intro, Livepeer's mission from the beginning has been to build the world's open video infrastructure. We've done a lot of video engineering in that sort of mobile content application. Because video is it's 80% of the traffic on the internet. We felt how hard it was to scale it, deliver it with low latency in a cost-effective manner. As a developer, most video streaming apps actually lose money because the cost of running video infrastructure is so expensive. And the only clouds where you can really do live video at scale were, surprise, surprise, Amazon Web Services and Google Cloud. And, those happen to be the same companies, Amazon and Google, that own YouTube and Twitch, the biggest VOD video platform and live video platform. Like, how can any video developer, compete with YouTube and Twitch if they have to spend the majority of their money to their owners, Amazon and Google, for video infrastructure? So there has to be a better way. There has to be an open access video infrastructure alternative that's cost effective, that doesn't require you to be in the walled garden of Amazon or Google, who own your competitors. And we said, well, the blockchain is actually the platform that can enable this. It can incentivize people with excess compute capacity, GPUs and servers and bandwidth, to make it available for video streaming for anyone that wants to pay as they go and access it. And so we set out on that mission. Let's create a video streaming platform for developers that's highly cost effective and open access and independent and permissionless. And we've been on that journey for 8+ years. In many ways, we've succeeded tremendously and have a great working global low latency, cost effective video infrastructure. In other ways, we still feel like an early stage startup that's trying to really productize in the way that makes a huge difference. And we'll get into where we're going, but just a little preview there. AI is impacting video just like it's impacting every other industry. And increasingly, our users don't want to just do traditional video compute, which looks like video encoding and transcoding. But they actually want to run AI models to generate videos and to enhance videos. And that's becoming a big part of the future of a video infrastructure network. And it's certainly a focus for us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. You kind of went from being reliant on the big tech guys to now you're trying to help other people not be reliant on them. It's really an interesting transition there. What was there a specific aha moment that made you believe that this could be a foundational piece of the internet, that your system could make that happen?
Moments was actually looking at the economics of video streaming and the compute in particular. To do video transcoding on a live stream, a lot of premium cloud services charge over $3 per hour to do it because they have a lot of sunk cost. They have to deploy this infrastructure around the world. They have to bundle it with other services, build products, do support, sales, etc. But $3 an hour per stream is a pretty significant cost. Imagine you're building a social application, you're letting hundreds of users, be streaming at any given time. That's thousands of dollars per hour, tens of thousands of dollars per day. We've seen startups that actually have success in video, but they burn through their millions of dollars of seed funding in like a month because they, can't afford the infrastructure. And they don't yet have a business model on top that makes that work. So what we found is there's so much excess compute out there. There's all of these GPUs that were deployed all around the world in use cases like 3D rendering and cryptocurrency mining and increasingly AI compute. And they happen to have video encoding and decoding ASIC chips on them that are on the cards already that can't do anything else, can only encode and decode video. And oftentimes they'd be sitting there doing nothing while the rest of the cards were being used for mining or other forms of compute. And we said, oh, if those infrastructure operators want to make additional money, they can power video streaming for something like, 3 cents per hour instead of the $3 per hour that the cloud providers are charging. And they can even increase their price a little bit to make a margin. And it comes at no opportunity cost. They already have these cards deployed and working in business models. So that was a big unlock. We said, oh, if we can actually orchestrate and harness this whole global compute, we can make video compute, 10 to 50 to 100 times more cost effective than it is through the cloud services. And that was a big source of momentum for onboarding supply and onboarding initial usage onto our network.
Okay. So give us a snapshot of where Livepeer stands today. Who's primarily using it, and how are they coming to you?
Yeah, a lot of the users are social media applications and event streaming applications and broadcast applications, things that might look like Twitch or YouTube can, build on Livepeer in order to power all the streaming. We've seen leading social apps in the sort of decentralized social space across ecosystems like Farcaster and Lens Protocol and Blue Sky build on Livepeer to power their streaming. They also appreciate the sort of decentralized aspects of it because these are decentralized social networks. But we also power things like internet game shows like Fish Tank Live that has millions of viewers. Uh, we power event streaming, so a lot of conferences will, their event streaming vendor will use the Livepeer network to power the video streams coming out of the 10 to 20 stages going on at the conference. So you see, you know, exciting streaming applications do, 3 to 4 million minutes of unique input video encoding per week on the network. We're really excited about some of the new AI experiments that are being built on Livepeer as well. You mentioned one, Daydream.live is really exciting. This actually will take your webcam stream or whatever you point your phone at and let you type prompts in real time, just like you would type into a Midjourney or Dolly or ChatGPT to modify that stream. So, we could do something creative, like you could say, make me look like Superman, and the stream will instantly change, and I'll be Superman instead of myself. A lot of people make themselves look like celebrities. It's all like an animated, cartoonish thing, and so it's not like a deep fake
Mm.
sort of generation platform. But then you see creators doing, really cool things from changing the landscapes and backgrounds of their streams on the fly to letting their audience interact and dictating how these things will work. We've seen musicians like DJs do live sets where the people watching the stream can modify the appearance and get involved. That increases interactivity. So really early experiments there. We'll see how these things get baked into applications and used at scale, but it requires a lot of compute. It requires a low latency global video stack, and Livepeer has been well suited to meet those needs.
Very, very cool. Very cool. Do your users need to be particularly familiar with the blockchain and working on it in order to utilize your platform, your system?
No, not at all. From a video development perspective, you would use Livepeer probably through a hosted service like Livepeer Studio, and that would look just like any other cloud API-based service that you were using to power your video. The users that use the blockchain are sort of on the other side of the network. They're not people building video applications. They are the people that are putting their servers, their compute capacity, their bandwidth onto this network to power the video streaming. They're the ones who participate in this whole blockchain-based protocol to register and be discovered, to list their prices, to negotiate work and jobs, all handled automatically, seamlessly by the software, and they're ultimately paid in digital assets that flow permissionlessly to them in fractions of a dollar every time they're encoding. So it creates this really efficient open marketplace where you can tap into anyone with idle compute resources. They don't need to be approved by a company or go through a complex legal contract or sign contracts or anything like that. It's just really efficient to put your machine on, get started earning, and power video encoding while you're at it.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about the AI side of things. So obviously Daydream is really leaning into it. What did it take to put together real-time video processing using AI like this? What were there any breakthroughs that were necessary that made this possible?
Yeah, definitely as an open project, we're built on the back of all the heroic work that open source developers have been doing out there for years across video and now increasingly AI. So typically the way that you'll see AI media progress is you'll see a great research result that says, hey, here's some research out of a university or a lab that shows here's how you could generate or enhance video using an AI model. And then you'll see some companies hire those researchers and create closed proprietary versions and release them and charge sort of gated access to their partners or their SaaS subscribers. And at the same time, you'll see open source developers and researchers and labs create open implementations of that research. And often the initial versions that come out are maybe comparable in terms of quality, but there needs to be a lot of performance enhancements in order to make these things run in real time. And when I say real time, I mean to keep up with a live stream without introducing additional latency, right? If I'm streaming, but I want my video changed, that AI model has to be running, at 15, 30 frames a second in order to keep up. And that's where the open source community really shines because that's where you have all of these hackers working on like quantizing models to make them smaller, to fit into memory on more affordable GPUs. You see the GPU hackers doing all these optimizations to swap the models of the video frames in and out of memory and take advantage of that. And a lot of this happens in these innovation communities like Comfy UI is one of the best communities for creative AI. And there's thousands of developers worldwide that are just it's their passion and their hobby, and a lot of it gets shown off and coordinated on Reddit and in Discord chat rooms. But the pace of change is so fast because someone somewhere in the world can release like an innovation, put it up on Reddit, make the code available on GitHub, and literally like go to sleep. And then the next morning, a totally independent developer somewhere else in the world like picks it up, runs it, and it adds some other enhancement. Right. And anyone that wants to run those open models on Livepeer can deploy it and have an infrastructure with thousands of GPUs to actually run this stuff cost effectively. And our community, which really coordinates in our Discord chat room, is a great center of activity and buzz for all that experimentation and everything. So it's really great and rewarding to see this like community aspect that's powering this future, and in some ways trying to keep up with the centralized giants like OpenAI, and in other ways, surpassing it or ahead of the curve.
How important was decentralization to your mission when you decided to found this company? Was that something that you specifically had in mind, or was that just the means to an end, so to speak, the best way to achieve what you were trying to achieve?
It was definitely intentional, and it was definitely something we specifically had in mind. But in many ways, it was and still is this grand experiment, kind of decentralized infrastructure run by thousands of people around the world, running open software and models developed by thousands of people all around the world, be better, faster, cheaper than what a verticalized, closed proprietary company can develop that can be more efficient in development and ruthless in their leadership and focus and everything. But can they tap into all these idle resources? Can they incentivize people to contribute and participate even when they're not, you know, the owner in the company? And like I said, in many ways, still a grand experiment. I think what we've proven is that you can have a reliable network and you can have a cost-effective network and still need to prove that the products that you develop on top to meet the market are as good and polished and integrated and performant as some of what a centralized entity delivers. But when I say we, it's kind of interesting because we're decentralized. I run a company called Livepeer Inc., and we do a lot of core development on this project. But there's actually, I think at this point, 10 or 11 other companies or entities or teams out there that are also owners in this network through the Livepeer token, and they're independently incentivized and funded to build on and around Livepeer that have nothing to do with my company, Livepeer Inc. And that's pretty cool and pretty powerful. And as an entrepreneur, it's really awesome to see more people believe in the mission in ways where if it works, they'll be rewarded as well.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. You can see how you're making an impact and forming that community that starts to function almost independently of you, or in a lot of ways independently of you. Yeah, very cool. How else are you seeing AI making an impact or being impacted by decentralization?
Yeah. So I think um, there's a couple different verticals to look at it, right? One is access to AI, right? I don't know how closely you've paid attention to AI regulation, and I think there was, the tendency to overregulate or be scared early on. You saw, a year or two ago, uh, a lot of like Elon Musk and a bunch of AI leaders who already had advanced models and products in market call for a halt on research so that we could develop AI safely. And it's like, what do you mean a halt on research? Like you signed a letter saying no one else can develop AI for 6 months, even though you have live products in market that are getting all these users and like you just want to leave, right? You've seen the previous administration had an executive order that said, hey, if foreign companies or entities are running AI models in your data center, you have to disclose or turn over their identities to the government. If you want to train an open AI model, if it's above a certain size, you have to register with multiple different cabinets in the government in order to do this. And like the size was determined by how many floating point computations you would need to train this model is just this arbitrary thing that our politicians have no idea what they're talking about when they go to police.
Right.
In a way, you could see access to AI, this like transformative technology being artificially limited by regulation. And in a way that would be advantageous to the big tech companies who were the only ones who had these, $100 million legal staffs and budgets to comply, whereas no startup could possibly have a chance to comply. And so
Yeah.
decentralization actually enables sort of this permissionless, unstoppable access to these technologies. Like if there's an infrastructure that anyone can deploy an AI model to or train an AI model on, and it's accessible anywhere, and it's payable via digital currency outside of the typical gatekeeping of one jurisdiction's financial system. Now all of a sudden you actually have open access to technology and innovation. And it sort of reminds me of the way that the government tried to prevent encryption algorithms from leaving the borders in the early days, when in reality, it's like, what do you mean prevent? Like, you're not allowed to travel across the border with encryption technology. Like, it's literally just a math formula, which anyone can read a research paper and re-implement themselves. Uh,
Yeah.
it's just an idea and it's math. And I think that should be open and accessible to everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Where do you see things going with AI and decentralization in terms of technology? Do you think that the AI hype is real, or that this is a bubble? Where do you see things going in the next few years?
Well, it's a little bit of both. Like the AI hype is definitely real. This is clearly a transformative technology, and anyone who's used it on a regular basis sees how much it can increase their efficiency. We've seen certainly in coding and software development how much of an impact it makes and how much it enhances productivity. We've seen that in certain industries like customer service. We've seen it in the creative process, whether it's producing writing or music or film. And I'm not saying it's replacing the creative process. It's just a tool that enhances it for everyone. The 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 AI hype is real. This is a transformative technology. Now, are we in a bubble? Is there overinvestment in, chasing the next frontier foundation model? Is there overinvestment in provisioning of infrastructure or energy resources to get your arms around compute in a data center to run your own AI? Yeah, maybe. It depends on your time horizon and your ambition of what you want to do. Because certainly a lot of compute can do a lot here, but certainly all of these startups that are raising, hundreds of millions or billions of dollars at multi-billion-dollar valuations, um, don't necessarily have a differentiated offer that's a fit with the market yet, and some of those are not going to work out. But hey, it brings in a lot of talent, brings in a lot of resources, it spurs the pace of innovation. Yeah, depending on what you care about or want to prioritize or think is best for society, I think that those things will only accelerate the progress.
Yeah. Well, let's shift back to Livepeer specifically and Daydream as well. What are you guys aiming for in the next, say, 12 to 18 months? What does a big win look like for you as a company?
Yeah, so Livepeer started as this centralized video infrastructure and powers end-to-end video streaming, and that's sort of always grown, you know, a bit, but sort of slowly. It's a competitive industry. And now that AI is impacting video and it requires so much compute to generate video or enhance video with AI, we see it as an opportunity to really like next 100x that growth rate. All our infrastructure operators are hungry for that growth. The products people are building on top are really exciting and inspirational. So you mentioned Daydream, and I think I gave a preview of it. It takes any live stream, like from your webcam or from a video camera or whatnot, and it can just you can type whatever prompt you want, and it'll change and modify and enhance that live stream. Anyone should check it out at daydream.live. It's really fun. Let your kids play with it because they'll start typing in fun prompts and modifying what's happening, and it's sort of a blast. But what'll happen in 12 to 18 months as a result of that? It's really meant to be an inspirational demonstration and almost like a toy because it lets people see the power of this. And what'll happen there is you'll see actual applications, things in production, things in different industries and more scale that want to make use of these capabilities. Like how can quickly typing prompts on a live stream enhance the creative process for storyboarding films or prototyping music videos or creative concepts. And I think you'll see developers want to build and integrate these capabilities into their applications, and that'll ultimately lead to the usage at scale. And at the same time, you'll see this whole community of open source AI tinkerers bring more and more capabilities to real-time video through these Comfy UI workflows. So, don't just creatively enhance live streams, but how do we analyze live streams using AI in order to spit out data or trigger alarms or make investment decisions in industries like safety or traffic monitoring or sports analysis or all these sorts of things. They can all be run on real-time video on the Livepeer network. And so, we'll go from the first 6 months inspiring people, letting them play with these toys to 6 to 12 months. Okay, production adoption in real applications to ultimately 12 to 18 months. Lots of businesses scaling built on top of this network.
So you mentioned that your system is kind of built to avoid the deep fake issue, but obviously not every developer is going to have those same ethics and guardrails. Do you have concerns that something like Daydream is going to be built that does give capabilities for looking like a specific person, doing the deep fake thing, and even like identity theft or being used for malicious purposes?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's like the genie's out of the bottle, right? Like this technology exists. It exists in open source formats, and there's lots of ways that can be used for good, and then there's lots of ways that can be abused. Just like every incarnation of technology that we've seen come along. And I think people will run those on all different infrastructures, whether they're closed or open access. Right. And ultimately, I think that, the technology industry and technology stack and society at large will have to adopt new tools and new methodologies to think about things like content authenticity and verification. Because again, it's just inevitable. Any piece of media that you consume, how are you going to be able to trust that what you're looking at came from a source that you think it came from? We are the first decentralized tech project to participate in this standards body called the C2PA from the Content Authenticity Initiative that has members like Meta, Facebook, OpenAI, Microsoft, and many of the other leading AI industry players. What it does is it has working groups. It has a set of standards that can be implemented for content authenticity so that people, when they create a piece of content, can digitally sign it. That can be verified by applications that it came from, a source. But like I said, there's going to have to be a whole technology suite that gets developed so that, you know, it means something to a user in a way they actually care about when they're looking at a piece of content, that there's, that blue check mark on it means that they can trust it. And, that answers also or opens all sorts of questions about identity and what's it mean that, you know, a political figure said that this was theirs, and is it actually that political figure? I think that's a whole slew of new can of worms that are being worked on that society will have to adopt to.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's a very complicated time right now with this stuff. And do you feel like the regulation is keeping up with the innovation in the space?
Well, I think the initial mistake is that the regulation typically has a tendency to try and get out ahead of things before they really understand the technology and the potential application or impacts of what they're doing. Because, of course, they're guided by fear of their constituents, and they're then guided by who they who has access to them, which is typically the deep-pocketed incumbents. And so typically they get out and say, we have to regulate this, we have to stop this before it becomes harmful. And yes, we'll do it in a way that the incumbents tell us is appropriate. But of course, what that does is it entrenches the incumbents, and it keeps them in power without, while barring access to everyone else. Right. And so that's the regulatory fear that I worry about. I feel much better about regulators being like excited and open about learning about the technology and creating safe sandboxes, if you will, for experimentation in ways where they have access to engage and be informed and think about regulating as the industry matures and we understand the use cases better. I think it's like it's only been a couple of years since the regulators finally figured out how to regulate like collecting sales tax on e-commerce purchases on the internet across all 50 states. And it's like, okay, we've had e-commerce since 1994, and it took until like 2021 or something to figure that out. How can we possibly believe that you could ever like regulate AI, which has innovation on a weekly pace, in a couple months of looking and listening to it. So I believe in technical and sort of unstoppable technical innovation, and that creates sort of abundance for society. And I look for like regulatory frameworks that enable that experimentation and make sure that countries that open that up get the advantage of having those industries based there and working in partnership with regulators.
Yeah, and that's the challenge as well, right? Is you've got this combination of decentralized technology so that it's kind of out of reach of the primary companies, and the governments don't really have the same control that they would if it's owned by a certain company. But then you've also got multiple international actors. I mean, China obviously is making a big push in the AI space as well. So you regulation here in America will only end up in a lot of ways hamstringing American companies.
Absolutely. And we're talking about that in the context of AI right now, but I've also seen it in the blockchain or digital asset side of Livepeer as well, where, for good reason, the regulators are trying to prevent a lot of fraud and grift and nonsense that occurs in a space where there is this sort of, speculation around financial assets, but at the same time, created no guidance and no pathways for like the legitimate, well-intentioned, professional funded technology first companies to actually, build with confidence in the United States. And it sort of scared a lot of great projects and entrepreneurs and innovators overseas into other jurisdictions that are receiving the benefits far more than the United States.
So, as a company right now, are you focusing more on developer adoption, creator traction, or ecosystem?
Yeah, really good question. All three of those things are very important. With this Daydream.live application, it's really showcasing to creators and tinkerers and the broader market what's possible with a real-time AI video. And so for one of the first times in our year journey, we are focused a little bit more on this like creator and consumer awareness and growth. At the same time, why are we doing that? It's because Livepeer is a developer platform. We believe developers that are inspired by seeing what creators and consumers do will be building and running applications on the Livepeer network. So that's sort of return to focus in the next 6 months. And of course, growing our ecosystem always is happening in parallel. There's, like I mentioned, Livepeer Inc., my company, is not the only company developing here, and there's a whole thriving ecosystem of people building and growing with funding available to them through the Livepeer protocol to contribute. So parallel efforts.
From a go to market standpoint, what have you found to be the hardest thing to scale? Is it the product awareness? Is it educating people on what your product does? Is it bringing them on board, make those final conversions?
I would say it's actually been more on the like the product fit with the market in a way that is uniquely differentiated has been one of our bigger challenges. We have an end-to-end streaming platform. It is more cost effective than alternatives. You would think that that might be really exciting and be enough, right? And I think there's a thesis early on that it would. So maybe you could say that scaling, sales and support and retention was a challenge. But in reality, what did we find? We found that oftentimes the feature set that people needed might look a little different for their use case. There's so many different video use cases. There's a lot of platforms out there that have been building, in video for 30 years and done a bunch of acquisitions, have every feature under the sun for different use cases. That might be a challenge. Also, you see companies that are building only inside of the big clouds, like built in Amazon, don't want to migrate a part of their stack off of Amazon for an independent infrastructure, even though it's strategically disadvantaged to them. And so, like I said, it's grown, but not necessarily the hockey stick growth you might expect with a more cost-effective platform. And I think that's been one of our biggest challenges, just the constant product iteration of like what's the right product to tap into the superpower of this network.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you out of here on this. Last question. So, if you had a magic wand and could instantly fix or change one thing about the business going forward, what would that be?
Question. Yeah, I think it would be really powerful just to like accelerate time and product maturity for 6 months from now, such that AI video is here and these open models are powerful and developers see the power and are ready to adopt and use it. And we really have the insights of how and where developers want to adopt it to make sure we're building the product to meet those needs. So, I need a magic wand of insights and market progression to come, but Livepeer is making sort of a big early bet on the future of AI video, just like we've seen AI adopted across text and images and now increasingly a video as well. So we're excited and looking forward to that future.
Very awesome. Well, thank you so much, Doug. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate the discussion. Always interesting to hear different perspectives on technology and really interesting to get into the decentralization regulation, some of those conversations. I think it's a really important topic right now. Before I let you go, where can people find you and learn more about Livepeer and Daydream?
So you can check out livepeer.org, the website to learn about the project holistically. But I really do encourage everyone to go to daydream.live and try playing with real-time AI video yourself. It's a lot of fun and accessible, and you'll get inspired.
Fantastic. And to everybody watching, thanks for tuning in. Please be sure to subscribe and leave us a review as it helps us be found by the algorithms. And as always, keep pitching, keep building, and keep scaling. Thanks for listening to this episode of Pitch, Build, Scale. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast provider so you never miss an episode, and we'll see you next time.